I still remember that morning when the sun slipped through the blinds and the smell of freshly baked bread filled my kitchen. I had been awake since dawn, making everything perfect because my daughter, Lily, was coming home after months. I told myself, today would be special today. She would walk in smiling like she used to before marriage, before everything changed. I wanted her to feel the warmth of this house again, the house that once echoed with her laughter. I placed the food on the table, feeling that old motherly pride rise inside me. But when the door opened and I heard her voice, everything shattered in a single breath. She stepped in her heels, clicking against the tiles, her face tight with worry, and then she shouted words that froze me. Don't touch that food. My in-laws are coming. Her tone cut through the air, sharp, cold, distant. I turned slowly, looking at her, not understanding what she meant. I said softly, Lily, what are you talking about? She looked at me, her eyes filled with panic, not affection, and said, Mom, please don't serve anything until they arrive. They have strict traditions about food and I don't want them to think you don't understand. She glanced around like she was ashamed to be here. I smiled, trying to calm her, saying, Lily, this is your home. I know how to treat guests. She shook her head nervously, saying, Mom, please let me handle it. I felt my chest tighten the way she spoke, like I was a stranger in my own kitchen, like she was protecting herself from me. The food I had made for her now became something forbidden. Her husband, Mark, entered with his parents. His mother's eyes scanned my home with quiet judgment. Her lips pressed into a thin smile. She said, how quaint, Lily, your mother must love simple things. I forced a smile, saying, welcome, please make yourselves comfortable. But Lily stepped in quickly, saying, Mom, please let me serve them. I stood there helpless as she took the plates from my hands, her hands trembling slightly. She placed the dishes carefully, pretending everything was hers, every recipe, every smell, as if she had made them. I sat silently at the table. They praised her for the food, thanked her for her effort. Not one glance toward me. My heart felt hollow. She had erased me in front of them, and they didn't even know it. When the lunch ended, her mother-in-law said, Lily, you've done well. Such grace, such poise. Mark smiled proudly at her, and I sat there invisible. I wanted to scream, to tell them that every bite they took was mine, my work, my love, but I said nothing because Lily wouldn't look at me when they left. She came to the kitchen, avoiding my eyes. She said, Mom, please don't be upset. I just didn't want them to judge you. I looked at her for a long time and said softly, judge me for what? For being your mother. She didn't answer. She just turned away, saying, Mom, you wouldn't understand. Her voice trembled, but she hid it behind pride. I watched her walk out of the door, leaving me surrounded by silence that felt heavier than any words could ever be. That was the first time I realized something inside her had changed, and that change would soon destroy everything. That night, I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the dishes still half full. The air smelled of disappointment and something deeper, something I couldn't name. I tried to remember when Lily had last called me, just to talk, not to ask for something or to make excuses. I told myself maybe she was under pressure, maybe her in-laws had rules, maybe this wasn't her fault. But deep down, I knew the truth. This wasn't about them, it was about her. She was ashamed of me, ashamed of where she came from, ashamed of the life that had built her. I walked into her old room, the one I had kept just the way she left it, the posters, the books, the photos on the wall. I touched the frame that held her graduation picture. She had been so full of dreams that day. I remembered how she had hugged me tight, saying, Mom, I'll make you proud. I smiled through tears then because I believed her. I believed everything she said back then, but now as I looked at her smiling face frozen in that frame, I wondered what had gone so wrong. The next morning I decided to visit her without calling. She had told me once that her new house was big and beautiful, but she never invited me. I wanted to surprise her. I baked her favorite cake and took the bus to the other side of town. When I reached the street, I hesitated. Her house stood there, perfect white walls, polished gate, garden, trimmed to perfection, like every piece was designed to impress the world. I walked to the door and rang the bell. When Lily opened it, her face changed from shock to discomfort in seconds. "Mom, what are you doing here?" she said, her voice tense. I smiled, holding the cake, saying, "I just wanted to see you and bring this." She looked behind her, like she didn't want someone inside to see me, then whispered, "Mom, you should have called before coming." I laughed softly, saying, "I'm your mother, not a guest." She sighed heavily, then forced a smile and said, "Come in, but please don't say much around Mark's parents. They're very particular about people." I nodded slowly, understanding what she meant, but pretending not to. We walked in, and I noticed how she had decorated everything expensive, lifeless, perfect, a home without warmth. Mark came in, smiling politely. "Hello, Mrs. Collins, nice to see you again." I said, "Hello, Mark, I brought some cake." He glanced toward the living room where his parents sat and said, "Oh, that's thoughtful, but they don't really eat sweets." I felt his words like small knives. Lily took the cake quickly, saying, "I'll put it in the kitchen." She disappeared, leaving me standing alone. Mark's mother looked at me and said, "Lily told us you don't visit much, must be busy." I smiled weakly and said, "I visit when I'm welcome." She gave a dry laugh and said, "That's fair." I sat there watching them talk about their business, their travels, their elegant life, and realized how small Lily must think I am in front of them. She never mentioned her childhood, never said a word about her father, who had died working 2 jobs just to send her to college. She had erased our story completely and built a new one, a cleaner one. When I tried to join the conversation, she interrupted gently, saying, "Mom, maybe you should rest. You've had a long trip." I understood the message. I stood up quietly and said I should go. She didn't stop me, not even once. Outside, I stood by the gate, clutching the empty cake box, feeling a cold wind wrap around me. I had never felt so invisible before. That was the moment something inside me broke. Not just sadness, it was deeper, heavier, something close to anger. I told myself I would not beg for her love anymore. I would make her remember who she was, who made her, and what she had done. I didn't know how yet, but the thought stayed with me, growing stronger with every step I took back home. And by the time I reached my door, I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was someone who had been betrayed and someone who was ready to fight back. Days passed, but the anger inside me refused to fade. It burned quietly beneath my calm voice and forced smile every time I thought of Lily's eyes avoiding mine. Something inside me twisted tighter. I tried to focus on my own life, on my garden, my neighbors, my small world, but nothing felt right. The silence of the house echoed with the sound of everything I had done for her, every sacrifice, every sleepless night I had spent working double shifts after her father passed away, just so she could have a good future. Now, that same future had made her a stranger. One afternoon, while sorting through old letters, I found an envelope addressed to Lily. It had arrived weeks ago, and I had forgotten to forward it. Curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. Inside was a notice from the city council about her property taxes overdue. I stared at it for A long time something inside me smiled faintly. She was struggling. Not everything in her perfect life was perfect. I decided to visit again, but this time not as the same naive mother. I wanted to see her world with open eyes. I called her pretending. I was worried. She sounded tired, distracted. She said, "Mom, I'm fine, just busy with some financial stuff, don't worry," I said softly. "Maybe I can help." She laughed in that half annoyed, half polite way and said, "No, Mom, I'll handle it. Mark has everything under control." Her voice cracked slightly when she said that. I heard it, even if she tried to hide it. Mark, the man who had once promised to keep her happy, now controlled everything. The next week, I visited her again, uninvited. When she opened the door, her eyes widened. "Mom, why are you here again?" I smiled, saying, "I just came to bring you some food. You look pale. Are you eating well?" She sighed, but didn't argue. This time maybe she was too tired. I noticed the house was not as perfect as before. Small things were falling apart: curtains, undone dishes, unwashed tension in the air. I asked softly, "Is everything okay?" She looked away, saying, "Just some money issues. Mark's business is slow right now. His parents are upset and they're blaming me." I nodded, pretending to be sympathetic, but inside I felt something darker forming. She had abandoned me for these people, and now they were turning against her. I said, "Maybe you should come home for a few days." She snapped quickly, saying, "I can't. Mom, that would make things worse. You don't understand. They'll think I failed." I looked at her carefully and said softly, "Maybe you already did fail." Her eyes filled with tears, but she turned away before I could see them. Later that night, I called Mark, pretending to be polite. I said, "Mark, I heard things are tough. Is there anything I can do?" He sighed heavily, saying, "Mrs. Collins, thank you, but it's not your concern. Lily is too emotional. She doesn't know how to manage responsibilities." I felt my stomach tighten. His words felt like poison. He was blaming her while living off her money. I said quietly, "She learned responsibility from me." He laughed, saying, "Then maybe she didn't learn enough." That call ended, but it stayed with me for nights. I realized Lily was trapped, just like she had trapped me in humiliation. The same silence she gave me was now surrounding her, but I didn't feel sorry, not yet. Instead, I wanted her to understand pain, not through words, but through loss. I started talking to one of Mark's business partners, a kind man named David who owned a competing firm. I told him things carefully, never lying, but never revealing who I really was. I mentioned Mark's arrogance, his carelessness with clients, his growing debts. Within weeks, rumors began spreading about Mark's failing deals. His partners grew cautious, and his investors began to pull away. The perfect life Lily built started to crack piece by piece, and I watched quietly from a distance, not with guilt, but with something like justice. Every time she ignored me flashed in my memory, and I whispered to myself, "Now she learn what it feels like to be invisible. Soon she come back, not as the daughter who looked down on me, but as the woman who realized who she truly destroyed." Weeks turned into months, and the silence between me and Lily grew heavier than ever. I stopped calling, stopped checking in, because I knew sooner or later she would come to me, not out of love, but out of desperation. I waited patiently, quietly, almost calmly, like someone waiting for a storm to break. And it finally did. One evening, as I sat by the window, watching the rain fall on the empty street, I heard a knock on the door. I opened it, and there she was. Lily, drenched, her eyes red, her hands trembling. She said softly, "Mom, can I come in?" I nodded. Slowly stepping aside, she walked in, looking around like it was her first time back in this house. She used to call home. She sat down on the couch silent for a long moment, then whispered, "Mom, everything's falling apart." I didn't say anything. I just let her speak. Mark's business failed. She said his parents blame me. They've left, and Mark, he's changed. He's angry all the time, he says. I brought bad luck. She covered her face with her hands and began to cry. The sound of her sobs filled the room, and for a second I felt my old motherly instinct reach for her, but I stopped myself. Not yet. She needed to feel the weight of her choices. I said quietly, "Lily, I'm sorry to hear that." She looked up, her eyes full of disbelief. "That's all you have to say, Mom?" I lost everything. I stared at her and said calmly, "You didn't lose everything, you gave it away." She looked at me confused. I continued, "You gave away your dignity, your love, your roots for people who never cared for you. You threw me out of your world because you thought I wasn't good enough." Her lips trembled. She said, "I just wanted them to respect me." I shook my head, saying, "Respect doesn't come from pretending to be someone you're not. It comes from knowing who you are." She fell silent, tears falling slowly. I got up, poured her a cup of tea, and placed it in front of her. She held it with shaking hands. She said, "Mom, please, I don't know what to do now. Mark left this morning. He said he can't handle the failure." I whispered, "Maybe now you understand what it feels like to be left behind." She looked at me in shock. "Mom, how can you say that?" I said, "Because I know that pain, Lily. You gave it to me the day you told me not to touch the food in my own kitchen." She froze, remembering that day. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. I could see guilt building in her eyes. I didn't want to destroy her completely, just make her face what she had done. She stayed the night, quietly sitting by the fire. Like a lost child, I went to my room but couldn't sleep. I thought about how revenge doesn't always come through anger. Sometimes it comes through silence, through letting someone live with what they've done. The next morning, she made breakfast for both of us, something she hadn't done in years. She said, "Mom, I don't know how to fix things." I smiled faintly, saying, "Maybe you don't fix them. Maybe you just start over." She nodded slowly, looking like a part of her pride finally broke, but she didn't know the truth. She didn't know that I was the reason Mark's business fell apart, that I had whispered his weaknesses into the ears of his rivals and watched everything crumble. I kept that secret buried deep inside my calm smile. She stayed for a week, helping around the house, slowly becoming the daughter I remembered, or at least trying to. One evening, she said softly, "Mom, thank you for taking me back after everything I did." I looked at her for a long moment and said, "You'll always have a place here, but you'll never forget what you did, will you?" She shook her head, quietly saying, "No, Mom, I won't." And in that silence between us, I found a strange peace, not forgiveness, not love, but something close to justice. Time passed, and the house began to feel alive again. Lily started spending more time at home, cooking, cleaning, helping me in the garden. It almost felt like old times, but underneath the laughter and small smiles, there was tension, a quiet, invisible wall she didn't know was there. I watched her trying to rebuild herself piece by piece. She found a part-time job at a local design firm. She even began teaching a few art classes for kids. Her eyes started to shine again, a little weaker, but real sometimes. She would hug me from behind while I cooked and say, "Mom, I don't know what I'd do without you." And every time she said it, a quiet ache formed in my chest, because I knew the truth would one day find her, and when it did, everything would change. Again, one afternoon, as I was folding laundry, the doorbell rang. It was David, the man who had helped me ruin Mark's business. I froze for a second, then forced a smile. He said softly, "I came to check on you. I heard things settled down." I nodded quietly. But before I could answer, Lily walked in from the garden. She stopped when she saw him. Her eyes narrowed a little. "Mom, who's this?" she asked. David hesitated, looking uncomfortable. I said quickly, "Oh, he's just an old friend helping me with some paperwork," but I could see suspicion growing in her face. She said, "Mom, I've seen him before at one of Mark's meetings. He used to work with his company." David shifted his weight, clearly uneasy. I said, "Lily, maybe you should go inside." She frowned. "Why? What's going on?" I sighed, slowly realizing the moment I had feared had arrived. She looked between us, confusion turning to anger. She said, "Mom, do you know something about what happened to Mark's business?" I looked away, saying quietly, "Sit down, Lily." She shook her head. "No, tell me the truth right now." My throat tightened, the room felt smaller. I said softly, "I didn't plan to hurt you, Lily. I just wanted to teach him a lesson." She stared at me, her voice trembling. "You did this, you destroyed him." I whispered, "I destroyed the man who destroyed you, the man who made you ashamed of who you were, the man who turned you against your own mother." She stepped back, her face pale, her lips shaking. "Mom, you ruined my life," she whispered. I said, "No, Lily. I saved it," she shouted. "Saved it. I lost everything because of you." I raised my voice for the first time since that day. "You lost everything because you forgot who stood by you when you had nothing. You let them turn you into someone cold, someone I didn't even recognize. You broke my heart every time you looked at me, like I was less than you." Tears filled her eyes. She whispered, "I was wrong, Mom. I was so wrong, but this was cruel." I looked at her quietly and said, "Pain is the only teacher that never lies." She stood there frozen and then turned away, saying, "I need time." I didn't stop her this time. She left, slamming the door behind her. For weeks I didn't see her. The house felt empty again, but this emptiness was different. It wasn't filled with sorrow. It was filled with silence that I had earned. One evening, there was another knock on the door. I opened it and saw Lily standing there, her eyes tired but calm. She said softly, "Mom, I still don't forgive what you did, but I understand why you did it." I nodded slowly, saying, "Sometimes love becomes something darker when it's left alone for too long." She said, "Maybe we both destroyed each other." I smiled faintly, saying, "Maybe, but now we can rebuild something honest." She stepped forward, hugged me, and whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom." I said quietly, "Me too." Lily, we stood there in the fading light, two broken hearts bound by pain and blood. In that moment, I realized revenge had given me peace, but it had taken away innocence forever. Love survived, but it would never be the same, and maybe that was the real punishment, not hers, not mine, but the kind that life gives when truth finally catches up. The morning sun rose gently that day, casting soft light across the kitchen floor. It had been weeks since Lily and I spoke openly again, but something in the air felt different. Quieter, calmer. She came into the room holding 2 cups of coffee and sat beside me. Neither of us said much at first. We didn't need to. Words had done enough damage. I looked at her face. It had changed, not from age, but from experience. She had lost her pride and gained something else, something that looked like wisdom. She said softly, "Mom, I got a new job. It's not much, but it's a start." I smiled faintly, saying, "Sometimes starting small is the only way to start, right?" She nodded, looking down at her cup, then said, I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened, how I treated you, how I let people control me. I never realized how easy it is to lose yourself when you're trying to please others. I listened quietly, letting her speak. She continued, I kept telling myself I wanted to make everyone proud. But I ended up making myself miserable, and I hurt you the most. I said softly, you wanted to belong. Lily, everyone does, but you forgot that love doesn't come with conditions. She took a deep breath, saying, and you, Mom, you went too far too. I nodded, slowly saying, I know, I just couldn't stand watching you suffer in silence after you threw me away. Maybe I wanted you to feel the same pain I felt. She looked at me, tears in her eyes, and said, and did it help? I thought about it for a long moment, then said, at first, yes, it made me feel powerful for once, but then it made me feel empty. Revenge is strange, Lily. It feeds on pain, but it never gives peace. She reached out and held my hand gently, saying, maybe this is our second chance, Mom. I squeezed her hand, saying, maybe it is. We sat there in silence, the kind that doesn't hurt anymore, just lingers softly, like an old song in the background. Later that afternoon, we went out to the garden together. The flowers had grown wild and untamed, just like our lives. We trimmed them, slowly, working side by side without talking. She smiled once in a while, and I saw a glimpse of the girl she used to be. I realized that forgiveness wasn't something you said out loud, it was something that happened quietly over time, like the earth healing after a storm. As the sun set behind the trees, Lily said, Mom, do you ever wish things had been different? I looked at her and said no, because maybe this was the only way we were meant to learn. She nodded, wiping a tear from her cheek, and said, then maybe this time I'll make you proud. I smiled faintly and whispered, you already have. When night came, we sat together on the porch, the sky above us filled with stars, the same sky we used to watch when she was little. She rested her head on my shoulder and said softly, thank you for not giving up on me. I looked up at the stars and said, thank you for finally coming home. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace, not the peace of forgetting, but the peace of accepting what had been broken and rebuilt. Love scarred, but still alive, maybe? That was the true ending. Not revenge, not victory, but understanding, the kind that comes only after everything else is gone, the kind that reminds you that even the deepest betrayal can't erase the bond between a mother and her child. And sometimes life teaches us that revenge may silence the pain for a moment, but only love has the strength to heal what betrayal leaves behind. Because in the end, even the deepest wounds fade when the heart finally learns to forgive itself.